saw there were some comments on Trello, so I think we should pick up on those first. So the can you see the glossary?
Yes.
Okay. The thing we're trying to converge on for quite some time now is what does it mean for a bad claim to be acceptable? And I noticed that Timothy posted some similar concerns than they raised before, related to types of claims. And Joshua had a tiny comment about the last sentence. I suggest we start with Joshua's comment because that will be easy to resolve. The current definition states this criteria will be evaluated by an individual community, a community accepted process. By this, do you mean that different communities will evaluate these criteria and change, adapt them, or the question of whether a bad claim meets this criteria will be evaluated? So the latter. So any suggestion how to make that clear?
1 second. I would say the former myself.
No, the former here means that the criteria will change. So what we're trying to say is that the community evaluates these criteria, well, checks for each bad claim whether or not it matches the criteria, correct?
Yes. Will be evaluated for these criteria will be evaluated for any given bear claim. That's good. Though I think I also see communities altering the criterion list.
Yeah, but that's not what we're saying here.
That's fair.
We're trying to agree on a criteria list. Maybe we cannot, and maybe we have to slim it down. But currently, the goal is to try to see whether we all agree somewhat on labeling these criteria as an acceptable bad claim or not.
Yeah, there's no criterion with which I disagree. I'm not sure that the list is complete yet, which is
just a little sundry thing. Stephen, I don't think this, like, I would propose the text that I have in here, like the question of whether a bear claim meets these criteria. The new edit still sounds like you're saying the criteria, I think what you want to say is not that the criteria will be evaluated, but the question of whether a bear claim meets the criteria will be evaluated. You know what I mean?
Whether it meets the criteria.
Yeah. And then secondarily is how fixed is our list of criteria. All right, not secondarily, but then we can get to, yeah, that's easier for me. And I think this caused me some confusion earlier. So thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, now we didn't really talk about this list of criteria. I just introduced them. And then the major discussion was about the distinction between acceptable bad claim and accepted bad claim. We have now made that distinction. So now we can focus in more detail about this list of criteria, to which degree we agree on that list. And so far, it seems like there's at least 3 people agreeing on it. And Timothy, maybe you can introduce what you've mentioned here. You mentioned types of claims, so maybe you can explain why that's relevant in terms of the list of criteria.
I mean, it goes back to the question of non-declarative statement claims.
Like this one, for example.
Yeah, and how do you know when something like an image falls into matching the definition as opposed to it doesn't? And I would, like, intuitively, what I would say is that, well, it is a bare claim when it can be translated easily into a declarative sentence, a declarative statement, I mean, that everyone observing it would agree is the declarative statement for the claim, right? As opposed to, you know, a novel or the Communist Manifesto, where somebody might pull out all sorts of claims that really happened, or we should do this, or, you know, you could pull out all sorts of different, and it, you know, maybe concept claims, which is an undefined term here. Is the concept claim related to this the same in everybody's head? And that's not counting ambiguity in the terms used, right? That's a separate thing. But, you know, are you?
I would be okay with what you stated before. that it can easily, or it's likely that it's, I'm okay with adding that to the list. We just need to think about it. Is there anyone that objects to what Timothy just said, to add it as one of the list of criteria?
I'm a bit curious because how is it? I don't understand how it is not covered by the second bullet point. It is clear which part of a shared representation people refer to, blah, blah, blah.
I think it's synonymous indeed, or well, similar.
Well, there's no definition for part, because if the shared representation is an image, then I would understand the part of the shared representation being the image, as opposed to the concept to which it refers. Right?
I have a workflow question, just to step back a second. I think this is a really interesting philosophical question, but if the purpose of the glossary is to help us work, I wonder if we necessarily need to finalize the list of criteria. Like, all we're trying to do, right, is define what is a claim. So it's possible, is it possible that Trello could work and we could move forward if we said a bear claim is a claim which meets the criteria for claims in the system. And then criteria for claims in the system is a Trello card that has some examples of what those criteria might be. And we don't actually need to adjudicate the completion of the list at this particular moment in order to move forward with the larger work.
I think we do need some agreement on what, I mean, yeah, you can totally postpone what a claim is, right? You can just label a claim is something that is in the system, but it just sidesteps the whole problem, which is that we're not agreeing really on what it is that is in the system and what the user stories are. So to a certain degree, we can do that. But in this case, my intuition is we cannot, because then we'd be going full circle again.
Yeah, our experience is that a lot of hidden disagreements are hidden in the details, and going through the details helps us surface them.
And we have a very broad understanding of bad claim now. I don't know whether you expressed agreement. You did. I mean, this can cover anything. We're not saying that that all systems need to support images per se. We still leave open that discussion, but it's just have some common understanding for the bad claim is. Now we're just trying to indeed pinpoint which are the ones that we find acceptable. And I personally think Timothy's addition, even if it indeed overlaps a bit with the second bullet point here, will be useful regardless. Can you hear me? I see I have low system resources.
I hear you.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, I'm wondering, we had this long online chat conversation when we said, oh yeah, we should make it clearer that bear claim, and now I'm less happy with the word bear claim, not with the concept we defined, but the word, because it includes both adorned and unadorned claims. And is going back on these things to make those precision part of the process? Like, we can agree, but we should be able to say, oh, by the way, we should add this, or we should, I'm proposing this amendment. What's the process you're proposing in it?
You just post comments, you retract so the process would be, oh, I'm no longer happy with this definition because it needs to be amended. You comment, and then you just subtract your agreement, so we can talk about it in the next meeting, or this meeting if we have time.
That's good. Okay, that works. I'm not sure I retract my agreement. I'm just saying I would propose an amendment, which is not the same as saying I'm unhappy with it.
But anyway, I think that's a separate discussion from this one, right?
It is.
Okay, good. Let me try to paraphrase what Timothy said.
So the notion that it can be translated to a linguistic claim. If it's not in linguistic form, it can be
not a linguistic. We have declarative sentence. It can easily be translated to a declarative sentence, and we can post the other definition there. And is likely to be done so similarly by all users. Is that it, Timothy?
Yeah.
Unambiguously, but yeah, that works.
I am okay with that addition. If all people that have already accepted this addition are okay with that as well, then we can just move forward from there. Then maybe Timothy agrees with this now.
I'd have to review the examples again to make sure I agree, disagree. Oh, yeah. Yeah, my other big issue with this is the requirement that it not be indexable. I mean, this is rehashing the same discussion again, but I'm having trouble reconciling an external link not being acceptable as opposed to referring to a person or something in the real world that can change as being acceptable.
Okay, so that's a very good point. I would say any index should be dated, and maybe the date should be part of the bear claim, but that does go against.
I think it is this more of a I think it relates more to what the bear claims again, shared immutable representation. I think the point here is that what I was making, why is this link, for example, to me, why is this to me an acceptable bear claim? And it's because it's immutable. In other words, it is a shared immutable representation. It's part of the bear claim. If you look at the bullet point, it contains no indexable references outside of the shared immutable representation. So I would argue
I'm okay
that
with that being an acceptable bear claim. Wait, is that a bear claim you're looking at there? Or, no, yeah, that's acceptable bear claim.
So I would argue here this paper reference is actually part of the shared immutable representation. It's part of the bear claim, or it can be.
So if I transformed a random hyperlink into a web archive hyperlink with including the date, that would be acceptable, which makes sense to me.
It's no longer indexable at that point, or the reference.
I apologize. Can you guys tell me what indexable references are?
It's references that depend on context, essentially. Like it's a linguistic term. Commonly, you could say, he just stated that, and then he is an indexable reference to whoever he is at that point in time.
Or most people think that something.
No, that's
most people not. No.
Ah.
Right. Yeah, I got it.
Like this, that, he, what he just said.
And the problem is, of course, it's never that well defined. Of course, I can replace he by John, and then, okay, there's a context in which we know which John we mean because there's lots of Johns. And then it's, we get more precise with the full name, and then it's somebody famous, but then it's somebody who shares a name with somebody famous, and so on and so forth. And the
Yes.
point Tim was making, which was interesting, is if I say, I don't know, I like Biden's policies, and then Biden does something I don't agree with anymore, then of course it's indexable to a point in time. It may stop being true, but that's
Is
right.
the intention behind this bullet that it contains no indexable references outside the shared immutable representation of this claim itself, or could that include other claims that are connected in the network of an argument?
Of the claim itself, the shared immutable representation points to the bear claim. So shared immutable representation is essentially a synonym for bear claim.
Could it? Marc-Antoine, sorry.
The intuition is the claim should not require context for interpretation.
Exactly. I can add that.
Yeah, that was a bit of my question. Like, could it point to, if there's a context that's agreed upon and that's in the immutable representation, then it could be indexable and point to something in the context, right? Because it belongs to the shared immutable representation.
That's correct.
That gets into the adornments or disambiguation.
Yes, exactly.
The statement could be he was wrong, but you define he was wrong about what he said. Then you would disambiguate with who he is, and you would disambiguate what he said, right?
And then it becomes Yeah, I did like the notion of standalone in that sense, that we used at some point. And standalone, again, may contain references to something, but something which is not about to shift under our feet or require knowledge of external stuff. That's really the bare idea. Standalone claim. Now, the question of I like Biden's policies, it's a really good question because it's standalone, but its meaning shifts every day.
But that's fine.
It's so far.
For some
right?
reason, that's fine. The question is, can we word why that is fine?
I'm questioning whether it's fine.
Okay.
I'm saying for me, or even, I could even be more explicit.
See, I think it's related to why I added, because yes, I agree. If you just stop the sentence here at no indexical references outside, but I added that are essential in order to express agreement or disagreement. It's not necessarily about the indexicality. The thing is, can you agree or disagree with you like Biden's actions, whatever, overall? And yes, most people will be, even if that changes over time or is ambiguous or different people interpret it differently. The thing I'm trying to distinguish here is something that you cannot agree or disagree with at all, because the context is essential. You need to know more. If you have a
thing. And what I'm saying is, if I encountered a sentence, and let me alter it a bit, okay? I'm playing with boundaries. Let me play with boundaries. I agree with Biden's policy so far. So far is a reference to a point of time which isn't mentioned. I agree with George Washington's policy so far. When was that said? At what point in George Washington's tenure was that statement made? I'd like to know what is the political.
Yes, I agree that so far here would be an example of something that is essential. But if so far is dropped, I would argue it isn't. What you're saying at that point is.
But what I'm saying is
the multiple interpretations are correct.
But what I'm saying is, if I say I agree with Biden's policy, the so far is implicit.
No, that's one way of interpreting it.
Well, I'm proposing that interpretation.
Well, it might not be so far. So far implies everything that happened before, as opposed to at this exact moment, which is when he changed his platform. I didn't agree before, but now I agree with them. That wouldn't be so far. No,
that's correct. But what I'm saying is, okay, one classic interpretation is, and I say agree and not agreed. There is a sentence, I agreed with his policies so far. That means I don't anymore. But here I'm saying I agree with everything so far, which means from any time in the past to now. And of course, any time in the past, do I mean since he's president, or do I mean his whole political career? That's interpretation, but let's not go there. Let's assume I mean president. Again, an interpretation. What I'm saying is it's up to now. Tomorrow, I might start disagreeing with that. And so the agreement with this changes according to what's the point in time referred to. And it's more obvious if it's George Washington, because the so far here is obviously blurry, right? Because it's not masked by the fact that I'm speaking right now. So you have the context of this is the shared point in time we are in. And when I'm saying I'm agreeing with Biden's position, you all assume the shared context point in time. That
no, because it's not part of the back claim.
I'm saying
anything that is assumed, if it's not part of the shared immutable representation, you cannot assume it. That's the definition of back claim.
So yeah, I'm so far agreeing that, you know, letting. I agree with the perspective that, oh, if they see the statement and they can agree with it or disagree with it right away, even if it's indexed, implied indexicality on time or whatever, I think it's acceptable.
But there are also edge cases, right? I think the reason why There is this line between acceptable and accepted is exactly because a community will eventually have to decide. If I'm a moderator on a platform, I would argue so far is not, I wouldn't accept it, because indeed so far is too, it's essential to know what you mean by so far when you say so far. When you drop it entirely, you're pretty much just doing a poll, and yes, polls can change over time, that's fine. Nothing says that interpretation of claims can change over time.
That requires most claims, a good portion of claims, to be anchored in time. Like you're going to have to say that if time is a component, it must be included as one of the elements of the representation. Because I agree with Biden's policies.
Well, the I is also indexical, so it would probably
but yeah, but you could say Biden's policies are the right ones, right?
That's indexical, because which ones do you refer to? All of them?
Yeah.
Well, but that's an ambiguity, right? That's there's ambiguity and there's indexicality. Yeah.
All of them is at least one plausible interpretation of that statement.
I think these are edge cases where indeed community processes will have to decide.
I did say that I was hunting for edge cases here.
Yeah, exactly. And there's plenty of those.
Joshua, you were about to say something.
Can we touch on what it means to be accepted? What does accepted mean?
Very good question. It's about the moderation process we keep postponing. But I think this is going to be community dependent. I don't mean process. I mean, what's the ramifications? What if a claim is accepted? Then what does that mean? If a claim's not accepted, what does that mean? I'm not sure what that word refers to on this card.
It means it earns the definition.
No, it's more than that, because you brought this up in chat last week, I think, and it was a very good point. Recall that the whole reason of introducing this definition is so that we have a more precise term to use in this use case. So in this case, accepted means that it is something you can link to externally that is stored in the claim repository. It's immutable, so it will no longer change. You have this promise, you can always link to it. And it can also be shown on other websites, whoever links to it. That's what it means here. So it's accepted in the sense that it supports this use case. And yes, I agree, this should probably become part of this definition that we have here.
Yeah, but then at that point, what you've done is you've moved the discussion of whether I want to accept that use case or not into the definition. And in which case, I don't agree with the definition. Because part of the definition is as defined in whatever use case, right?
No, but the whole reason we introduced the definition was because I wanted to clarify what this user story meant. You don't have to agree with the user story.
You did that with bear claim, right? We iterate on definitions until so we can talk about things.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can say, I'm not interested in this user story. For me, it's different, or I want to support more claims or other claims or whatever. Right. We can go over that, but I just want to reiterate the reason this definition exists in the first place is that user story.
No, that's fine.
I mean, in that case,
I agree with Tim. You cannot found the user stories in the definitions and the definitions in the user stories. You have
no. We have to include it in the definition here. So the point Joshua raised is correct. We need to outline here what does it mean for it to be accepted, and I would say that it becomes immutable, that it becomes a bad claim essentially. Like I would contrast it with
Lord. so
I would contrast it with contributed bad claims, which are not really bad claims; they're still mutable.
That's an implementation or a platform detail, right? They could always be immutable in the first place.
No.
Yes,
I'm skeptical of things. I mean, URLs can be immutable, but the claims themselves may evolve forever.
No, but that's by definition, a bad claim does not evolve forever. A bad claim is a shared immutable representation. Conceptually speaking, I don't care how it's implemented. If you have one bad claim, that's a shared immutable, that's what it is.
And I agree with that. If the claims, it's not that the claims evolve, it's that the interpretations of the claim, there's new interpretations for the claim. There's new concepts attached to the claim. That's kind of the around the claim, but the claim itself, it's a sentence and maybe some formalizations and stuff like that. That is immutable. If it's not clear enough, then we'll have a pointer saying, by the way, this got updated by a clearer version here, less ambiguous, less this, less that.
Which would
maybe Stephen, this user story really wants to be, instead of accepted bear claim, maybe it wants to be your canonical claim that we haven't yet defined. I mean, for me, I look at this user story and I agree with these users. Well, I still not totally certain I know what we all mean by accepted, but I could also imagine the exact same user story for a bear claim that's not yet accepted. I could want to link to it, support and oppose it, and have web content linked to it.
So no, the reason why immutable is important here is if my reader starts supporting and opposing it, and all of a sudden the claim changes, it says something different, the arguments that support and oppose it might become invalid simply by the mere fact that the thing evolved. That's what you want to.
That's true.
Or the mere fact that you write a blog post and you want to show a bad claim in your blog post, and now other people in the system start changing it, all of a sudden they're changing the meaning of your blog post. That's why this use case doesn't want mutability there. And there are use cases where you want mutability, but that I would call a canonical bad claim. So this is the exact distinction with what I would later introduce as a canonical bad claim. I want something immutable I can link to from external sources.
And I think the answer to your question about acceptable versus accepted is there is a curation process by which somebody proposes a claim to the system and says, you know, I think this claim should be in the system. And then we check whether it fits those criteria. And when whatever curation process validates that it meets the criteria, then it becomes accepted and linkable. Until then, it's presumably, proposed in probation bear claim. It's probably still in the system, but it might. I would argue against linking to it, because one thing that will happen is that we are very likely to modify it actively to say, oh, it's not yet acceptable, but maybe if we modify this and modify that and resolve that index and replace that pronoun, and we're more precise about this and reduce that ambiguity. Okay, this is a form that is more acceptable, and at some point it ticks the marks and it gets accepted, and hence it gets linkable. Now, I might be interested in linkability of each intermediate form for other reasons, but for other reasons is important. But since your question was about what does it mean for a term to not be for a claim to not be accepted, the idea is we don't recommend linking to it yet, because we don't know that it's the kind of thing you'd want to link to, because it might be too ambiguous, too indexical, to this, to that.
For the purposes of the definitions, I follow and I understand what these terms mean. In my mind, this problem of linking to things that are changing is something that would be managed eventually by the moderation of how things get edited. From a practicality standpoint, I would predict that on this system, everything is constantly changing and updating. My personal, my view of what's practical is that talking about how defining for a world in which things are constantly being mutated is it will be most valuable in the end. But I know what is meant by these cards. So I'm able to have conversations using these cards, even if that's my view of where things will end up.
No, but nobody's saying that mutability is desirable as well. What I'm saying is the user stories that the main user story I listed there doesn't want mutability. And you can disagree indeed with that user story. We can move there then, but so your question is why does it need to be accepted is exactly that. It can be linked to from external sources with the guarantee that the shared representation will always stay the same. So I added this. I think that's the main reason why I would have this process of accepting something. And on the
it sounds like from your use case, you're wanting two things. You want to link to something that is sufficient quality and is immutable, right?
Come again?
That's what he's saying, yes.
It seems like for your use case, what you're wanting is the ability to link to claims that are of a sufficient standard of quality and that are immutable, right?
Mhm.
Which makes me think that the glossary definition title, the names are misleading or inaccurate,
We can rename them.
right? It should be a name that says something like good quality immutable claim, as opposed to accepted claim, for example.
Well, I'd be okay with renaming bad claim as immutable claim. I mean, it is a shared immutable representation. Maybe that will resolve some language issues.
But does it mean if someone contributes a new claim that it's by definition not a bear claim? No. Because
Depends what you mean.
Because
You can
before you
contribute-
mentioned it's mutable before.
It depends what you mean. You said if somebody contributes a new claim, my question is which claim? That's what we're trying to define. I have a user story where I want people to contribute immutable claims, but you might have different things in mind.
Let me put it this way, Felix. I see two ways, because I think I'm aligned with Stephen on this. There's two possible architectures. One in which the proposed claims are also immutable, even though they're not acceptable, they're not high quality. But what we do is we have the link from here's the original proposal and here's the link to the acceptable form thereof after iteration process. Or we can have a system where claims remain immutable until they're acceptable. And then they are put in an immutable information space after they've been made acceptable in some fashion. If, like me, you believe that acceptability is going to be a continuous, ongoing process, and I think Stephen would agree with that as well, that does mean, and yeah, Joshua certainly does, that does mean that this, even once a claim has been immutable, we might still want to ask the system, has there been an improved version, an agreed upon improved version of this claim? And we may want to update the link at that point. But I agree with Stephen totally that it still makes sense that the link or the quote quotes to the original before, not necessarily the current form, but the immutable past form, because that's what you were talking about. And the fact that it got updated may mean that whatever you said about it needs to be updated as well. Because maybe your blog post was saying, you know, this claim is really ambiguous, and now here's the new form, it's much less ambiguous, so you'll want to update your blog post. It makes sense. So being able to refer to the past forms makes sense.
For me, that would be a group of bad claims which link to one another, which probably could be grouped on a concept like canonical claim.
Yeah, and now, or what I keep calling equivalence classes, and we'll need a name for that, or concept or whatever. But the concept is a bit different because it's more than just the statement of the claim, it's condition, and it's more than the adorned bear claim, or it's adorned in a certain way. And so we're still negotiating.
We don't have to go into the details now. The point is that the fact that we define these things hopefully allows us to more easily talk about these things we do want to introduce later on. Nobody's saying we don't want to be able to do that. We don't know whether we're going to call it a concept claim, canonical claim, whether or not we want to model equivalence classes. All these things I think we want to talk about, but we're trying to now find the words to do so.
Yeah, but I agree with Stephen's use case. We want to be able to point to an immutable claim. The fact that the claim will keep evolving doesn't mean that it's not immutable. It just means that there's a way to go from a version to subsequent versions, which may be plural, which is another story.
So in a way, I would argue if you rename bad claim to immutable claim, and we just later introduce contributed claim and then accept it, well, then accepted bad claim can essentially become equivalent with immutable claim.
I second that proposal. I was not happy with bear claim.
But I mean, we still need the list of criteria. Oh no, we had an acceptable yeah, an acceptable immutable
Acceptable
claim,
immutable
essentially.
claim.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would still work. What do people think about this, renaming bare claim to immutable claim?
I'm fine with that.
Tim, Joshua, Bentley.
They ran away.
I'm trying to make lunch. The one question I have about that is, was bare? No, I guess it was contributed claim that was still mutable. Bare claim is immutable. I mean, I question why you would want to make immutable something that doesn't match the standards that you're looking for.
We wouldn't, right?
I said that's a design choice. Either way, both are valid. Either you make proposals, you allow proposals to already be immutable, or you make them mutable. But what is certain, I think, not what is certain, what I think a lot of us believe is that even when something is deemed acceptable at one point, it might still get improved upon. So the process of refinement of immutable things, which will be by external links because you don't change an immutable thing, could also apply to proposals or not. I don't care.
From the perspective of making this Trello board readable to other people who are not on this call, when thinking about how to title bare claim, I would choose a title. I think what you want to communicate is that this is like the base, most minimal form. And then as we move up, it gets like, there's other stages where other things are added to the bare claim, other criteria that it meets.
No, but that's not what it is, though. It's really about the immutable nature. It's a shared immutable representation. That's really the key thing here.
I know that's, but that's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about how this card on Trello exists in relationship to other cards on Trello. And this one seems to me like it's in the middle of the nesting doll. You know, like other cards on Trello will be bare claims plus other attributes. I would pick a name like raw claim or something like that.
To give an example, a canonical claim that Marc-Antoine tried to say, which maps the evolution of a claim over time, wouldn't be a bare claim, for example. It would be quite the opposite. It would be trying to encompass the evolution of a claim, and it might do so by referring to bare claims. But it's not like a refinement of bare claim in any way. So that's again not what this definition was introduced for.
I object to something else. You say bare claim is, you said, Joshua, bare claim is the kind of the original form and the seed, and then we refine it. Actually, bare claim, I argued recently in the chat, is probably an interface or a union class, because it encompasses two very, very different things. Bare statement, like raw statements, pure text, or raw statement with adornments, adorned statements, which are totally different things. And we didn't go into that, but I'm saying I don't think bare claim is a fundamental entity. It's abstraction of.
Then disregard my comment.
Things.
I like renaming it to immutable because it would make this thing more readable. As a web author, I want to link to an accepted immutable claim in the claim repository. It says really what I want to achieve, like the thing I just added before. The immutable is essential. So just naming it immutable will help with that. So if there's no further protest, let's see who accepted this. Well, you did, Joshua. Felix, no protest from you?
He said he's okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So then I am going to uncheck Jonathan, though.
Move it back to alignment. And let's rename both of those to immutable. Yeah.
But this could actually just be acceptable claim. or not? That's an interesting one. I'm not certain. No, probably not, because it relies on the shared immutable representation effect. It doesn't automatically update the links, it seems.
Yeah, it doesn't matter much. It's still working now?
Sorry?
Is the link still working because you renamed the...
Yeah, it's the ID is in the link. So it's simply to have readable URLs that they do that.
Oh, right, okay.
It should work. Let me check. Yeah. The internet is slow. Yeah. Okay.
Screen sharing makes the screen slow, I've noticed.
Yeah, my laptop is slowly dying. I need to get a new one.
No, don't get me started on that.
More importantly, then we can go here. I think next on the agenda, we have 10 more minutes, was checking whether or not there were other user stories in this list that share the same definition, or one of the definitions that we already discussed. And I think number 3 is a candidate there. As a reader, I want to view a claim in the claim repository so that I can see all the reasons for and against that claim at a glance to quickly understand the issue. For me, this could actually be both. This could be an accepted immutable claim, probably later also a canonical claim that we haven't defined yet. But this, to me, definitely also encompasses the accepted immutable claim. What do you guys think?
Good question. I think we would want it to be the claim family. I'm not comfortable with the canonical claim terminology, by the way.
Yeah, right. So, and you're probably going to argue you want it to be the claim family or canonical or concept or whatever, because it's very important that while showing that, you also show like here the refinements of this accepted immutable claim, essentially.
Yep.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So this one is a candidate to introduce the definition for that thing that you tried to summarize before, Mike Antoine.
Yeah, it is. The yeah, claim family. I don't know what you think of that term, or claim intent or claim concept, right? This is
well, we don't need. We first need to try to define it, and then we can come up with a name, because these names are always imperfect, as we have just demonstrated.
Yes, yes.
But I still think, even if you show, let's say, working title, the claim family, you will also want to show the accepted immutable claim. Like if you, yeah, what happens with the arguments that underlie it, I guess, over time as you refine the claim?
The one thing where your union class, sorry, I would like to get into some of my argumentation here. I did agree with the immutable claim, bare claim, ex-bare claim class as a conceptual category, because it's something we need to be able to talk about. But I say it's really two different things, because in my mental model, the raw text statements and the, let's call them concepts, sorry, including adorned text as a way to do the context, but yeah, let's say context with a lot of adornments, let's put it that way, and some is not even tied to words, doesn't matter, like definitions or all I said about definitional properties and distinguishing properties and stuff like that, right? Those, let's say that all those are part of what I call concept. So when we do equivalence classes, we do it both at the concept level and at the raw text level. We say this means the same as that, this means the same as that, and we do it across. But if we do, because as usual, text and concepts are in many-to-many relation. So if we put them all in one blob and do equivalence class on that, the equivalence classes will be too broad, will be not fine enough, because one statement is interpretable as many concepts, which I want to keep distinct in the equivalence classes, whereas in the concept equivalence classes, and vice versa. So there's an equivalence class happening at the statement level, and there's an equivalence at the raw text level, and there's an equivalence class happening at the concept level. And for me, those are two separate processes because it's a many-to-many between both. Is that clear?
Not really. Maybe it helps if you try to identify, like, because you're talking again about something you want the outcome to be, but like what user story would you need this in? And we can add it if it's not added in the list yet.
Okay, there's many user stories there, but basically I want to say that this raw, okay, this concept
is this one?
Nah. Reading. No, it's none of that. I want to be able to say that this sentence that is unadorned claim, immutable claim, can be interpreted as either of two different adorned claims. So that's the first thing, the distinction. And
so
maybe we could clarify row 5, merge two claims. In that sense, what you're saying, Marc-Antoine.
what is row 5? Having added the
row 5, ID 4.
I want to restate it with the definition so that there's less room. Yes, that's one special case. As a, I don't know, as a what, I want to point out, no, I want to,
and especially I'm interested in the end goal because that's been clear to me here.
Okay. There's a sentence. It may even be adorned or not, but in a way, there's two processes here, so I want to distinguish them. I want to say this sentence is ambiguous and can be interpreted as two different adorned claims / concepts. So I want to say there's ambiguity so that, you know, people using it use the precise version so that I know what to argue against or for, because at this point, it's the ambiguity makes the statement meaningless to me. I don't know.
In other words, it's the notification thing you're interested in here. You want to say, hey, this is ambiguous language, and anyone using that ambiguous language you want to notify. Is that your use case?
I want to, I want to introduce disambiguation to a raw text, immutable raw text, because we did say, or to non-raw text, by the way, to an immutable claim. I want to introduce a disambiguation to a bare claim. I want to introduce two different interpretations to a bare claim to point out an ambiguity that needs to be resolved before the claim is usable. Should I write it? At this
Please,
point,
yeah.
yeah, I think it's, where is that Google Doc again? Ah, too many windows open. It's ridiculous. Do you have the link in handy? I don't.
It's
Sorry.
in the Google board as well. It's in the first column
Okay.
in the Trello board. Sorry.
Oh, in the Trello board. I had the Trello board. Okay, I really need to clean up my links.
What do you want to disambiguate here?
An immutable claim.
Yeah, I sent the docs link in the Zoom chat.
Sorry.
So that people using the
As,
ambiguous claim are notified about this ambiguity. This is my attempt, but feel free to edit.
yeah, as distinct.
And I would argue this immutable claim is probably an accepted immutable claim the way I currently understand it. Unless for you it has to be something different.
So that's one thing. So I forgot this. So that.
Okay. You're encompassing many more things you'll need to explain in order. I mean, what is an adorned accepted immutable claim?
Well, it's adorned versus unadorned, right? I mean, we said we'd introduce that. Raw piece of text versus something which contains.
So the declarative sentence versus an accepted immutable claim, perhaps.
One second. Declarative sentences are bare claims, aren't they? Or immutable claims, aren't they?
They can be, yeah. They can also be a declarative sentence plus adornments or whatever.
Exactly.
Or an image.
That's exactly what I mean by adorn. It's a bare claim which happens to not be an. When I say adorned acceptable immutable claim, I mean accepted immutable claim which happens to not be a pure declarative sentence / raw text.
So you're trying to distinguish essentially between, like, for example, saying Paris the city is nice would not be a distinct concept you can introduce from Paris is nice if both are just declarative sentences. So it has to be some adorn. I think if you're going to do this, I think we first need to introduce a user story that encompasses adornments, because otherwise it's going to be just all about interpretation of adornments.
Yeah, well, it's the same concepts I've been talking about for 3 years now, the distinction between symbol and concept. And the adornments are one way to hint at concepts. Of course, we cannot represent concepts, but we can get closer to concepts. But I keep saying symbols, AKA declarative, well, AKA statements of which declarative sentences are a special case because we keep going with the bottom of the tree, with the far branch instead of the root. But statements are in many-to-many relationships with concepts.
Oh, wow.
We are trying, some statements are full-on declarative sentences. Declarative sentences are a case of symbols that or statements. I'm using statements as a synonym symbol here, and I'm thinking that may be misleading. So let me keep symbol for now.
Well, a lot of stuff is misleading because you're introducing concept, you're introducing adorned, you're introducing symbol. Well, a symbol is the.
Okay,
I have a hard time interpreting this. That's all I'm saying. I think I know what you mean, but I'm not certain.
okay.
You're already trying to add the definition of concept, I think, in the user story. Why not just try to add the definition to the glossary board instead?
That's probably a good idea. So that's my
that's the whole point, right? You say you want to introduce a disambiguation, essentially, or a concept, or whatever you want to name it. And then the question is, what is that? And then you have to write up a definition with the matching examples and not matching examples. And then we can start using it. But here you're trying to do both. You're trying to add the definition to the user story.
Well, they're asking me for a user story, and the user story requires new concepts. Yes.
Yeah, but then can't they just have a simple name like propose a disambiguation?
Yeah, the problem is trying to fit with the accepted vocabulary, and the accepted vocabulary is at.
You don't have to fit with the accepted vocabulary. You can introduce all new entities if none of them match.
Okay. So as a contributor, I propose two distinct concepts as well interpretation of an accepted immutable claim, which, and really those are two user stories, and I should distinguish two user stories because they are distinct, frankly, and it's just confused together. So let me do that.
And I wonder, why do you need to introduce two? You always have to introduce two?
No, not always.
It seems to be because...
It's because immutable claim is a conflation of two things, right? Next.
I mean, right now you write it that you need to introduce two. So I was asking, why do you need to introduce two?
Because there's two cases. Let me do. Okay. I will, and then the next.
Do we still need the parentheses, adorned accepted immutable claims?
We can remove it. Sure, I'll do it.
Propose two distinct concept claims. So this is something new that you need to define as valid interpretations of accepted raw text immutable claim.
AKA declarative sentence, but that is accepted and immutable and this and that. Their claim in declarative sentence form. The thing with our language is that it's not, I want our language to be more compositional. Oh, we've lost people.
Yeah, because we're at the hour, probably. I think we can easily try to wrap this one up.
Yeah. I think I need to do my vocabulary, my glossary. It's going, and then show how it maps to the other.
Well, I'd be interested in. So the problem is you're introducing a lot of new stuff. So it seems like there's a more fundamental user story that probably is add a concept claim, and then we can start thinking about why do you want to add a concept claim? Like, where does this concept claim come from in the first place?
It's basically the acceptable immutable claim, which are adornments and not raw claims. Which are adorned and not, sorry, not adornments, but adorned and not declarative statements.
Can you make
wait.
examples of adornments? Is it like fixing typos, reformulation?
No,
and
no,
things
no,
the
no,
same,
not at
or
all.
what-
It's like
what is
adding a
it?
definition to an accepted immutable claim.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it's just like the immutable shared representation just contains a definition, for example, as an adornment. So you know, the noun used in that declarative sentence uses that definition. I think it makes more sense to probably introduce a user story that adds adornments to an immutable claim. Well, or introducing a mutable claim with adornments is probably the first one we need to define.
Let me attempt to make my vocabulary consistent at this, because
But so you want a subset essentially, right? You want to name a certain subset of accepted immutable claim, or of immutable claim rather.
No, the problem is we're not, as I said, we're not starting with the same base concepts. So some concepts, fundamental concepts of yours correspond to combinations of mine, like unions of my union class of mine, and vice versa. My base objects are symbols and concepts, really. And then some of those happen to be about entities or claims or arguments or predicates, right? That's one axis of distinction, which is not important to me. I mean, it exists, it's important, but starting with claims mean we're doing the whole symbol concept distinction in one part of the hierarchy.
But then why do you name this a claim? Why not name this a concept?
I'm following you. Because I'm following you, and I shouldn't.
But you don't have to. So just call this two distinct concepts.
Yeah. See, and if we rename this and remove the claim, then there's a specialization of those user stories that is at the claim level, right? That is more familiar to.
Yeah, but then we can talk whether or not.
Yeah. So basically, what I have is I have a symbol, which is basically a phrase, string of raw text, and I'm saying, well, this could mean this or this could mean that, and I can rephrase this as text, which is not what I'm speaking about in those user stories. But what I want is to say, these are proposed definitions for these symbols, and here's two, because this phrase is ambiguous. And now it could turn out that that's the first user story. Now it could turn out that my definition itself, though it's more a concept than a symbol, is itself still has ambiguity. So I want to say, by the way, this is still ambiguous, so let me make that clearer. And so yeah, I should come up with examples for that. And that's going to be homework.
Yeah, I think it's true, but one recommendation I can give you is try to, if you want to be broader, then try to be broader. And then we can still later talk about the relations between these different definitions. We don't need to settle on that right now.
Okay. But yeah, I should be able to say this definition in the glossary corresponds to this, this, and that in my, or the way I carve up the world, so to speak.
Yeah, but that's what you do in the definition.
Yeah. Okay, so let's call it a day, and let's see tomorrow. And because let's write that in the chat. We're meeting tomorrow. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure. Yeah.
Tim said yes. So let's put that in the chat.
At least we have a small group tomorrow.
Good. See you tomorrow then.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, let me go.